Hi guys, I'm Libertman, forced to be alone but free to decide how to live it. Welcome to the second live stream of the day, and in this occasion we're talking about a moment most men never name. Not rejection, not betrayal, not even loneliness, but the moment when a man quietly stops expecting support. Not because he believes no one exists, but because his system no longer registers support as a realistic outcome. From that moment on, something collapses inside. Not emotionally dramatic, psychologically silent. So this live stream is about that collapse. What science calls expectancy failure, and what men experience as anticipatory hope shutting down. So for this topic, I selected a paper, a scientific paper that can shed some light about it, from Maier and Seligman. study that is called Learned Helplessness at 50, Insights from Neuroscience. So this paper is an update on learned helplessness, controllability, this term called expectancy collapse, and passivity. It is not male only, but male implications are carefully contextualized. You can, as always, find the link to this study in the description, box. So what learned helplessness actually means and what it doesn't, in case it's the first time you hear about this concept. The term learned helplessness is widely misunderstood. It does not mean weakness or resignation or passivity as a personality trait. It describes what happens when an organism is exposed to uncontrollable stressors and learns that action does not change outcomes. That learning reshapes expectation. So I will begin to read some excerpts and then commenting. It says, the original learned helplessness hypothesis proposed that exposure to uncontrollable stressors produces a motivational deficit characterized by passivity. Well, here notice the word passivity, not despair. The system doesn't collapse emotionally. What it does is to adapt. When effort no longer predicts relief, the brain conserves energy. It simply stops trying. So let's see how controllability, not pain, is the key variable here. A critical correction in this paper is this one, that helplessness is not caused by stress itself, but it is caused by uncontrollable stress. I continue reading a line. It is the absence of control rather than the presence of stress per se that produces helplessness. So this is essential for understanding men. Many men tolerate high workload, high pressure, and sacrifice, right? As long as they believe, if I push through, something will change, or I will get this rewarding outcome. The collapse happens when that belief dies. Not because pain increases, but because control disappears. So the paper explains that expectancy is central. If outcomes feel uncontrollable, then the brain reduces anticipatory effort, the brain suppresses approach behavior, and defaults to inaction that leads to that passivity. This is not conscious pessimism. It is predictive learning. So how this maps to men and support? Let's contextualize this carefully. Men are often socialized to offer support, not to request it, right? We are living in a context still in which we are still required to behave in the traditional value system to be the provider and to be to provide all the traits that were expected as typical in men in the decades, in the previous decades, regardless that women also reciprocate were being traditional, which we can observe and experience that they don't. So also, men are often trained or socialized to solve problems independently and to downplay emotional dependency. So when men repeatedly experience that emotional disclosure without response, when they experience vulnerability without reciprocity, when asking for help is followed by dismissals, they don't rage, but they stop expecting. Support becomes theoretically possible, but neurologically discounted. So, anticipatory hope is not optimism. It's the expectation that if I reach out, something will happen, especially something positive for the person. When that expectation fails repeatedly, the system adapts to that as well. Hope is not crushed emotionally. It is removed computationally from the brain. The brain stops allocating resources toward outreach because it sees no point economically, energetically. And why this doesn't feel like giving up? Men in this state often say, I'm fine on my own. I don't need anyone. It's just easier this way. And subjectively, it is easier because the system has reduced prediction error. No expectation means no disappointment. That's not strength or weakness. It's simply regulation. So it's important to notice what this study does not claim. This study does not claim inevitability, permanence, male-specific pathology, or emotional incapacity by men. It describes adaptive passivity under a context of uncontrollability. The danger is not the adaptation itself, but building an identity around it. So if you have been enjoying by now this live stream, please help the channel with your like by giving a like to the live stream or to the video replay, and subscribe to the channel, and please share this video with someone else that may be benefited by the content. That will help a lot to expand this content further. So let's try to show how this expectancy collapse reshapes our male identity. And let's see why some men withdraw quietly while others harden emotionally. And let's analyze this situation through the four C4PC macro groups. So by now we were seeing that one of the most important ideas in this paper is subtle. Is that helplessness begins as a state, but it becomes dangerous when it turns into a trait. When passivity persists long enough, men don't just stop acting. They start redefining who they are. Not consciously, but narratively. By saying to themselves, I'm just independent, I don't rely on anyone, I work better alone. These statements feel empowering, but often also mask a collapse expectation, not a chosen value, like, of becoming a Sigma male naturally. So why men rarely notice the shift? I continue reading another line. Passivity following uncontrollable stressors may persist even when control is later possible. Well, this explains something many men experience but cannot explain. Even when supportive people appear later, the system doesn't re-engage automatically. And why does it happen? Because expectation has already been updated. Our system, or our brain system, starts saying reaching out does not change outcomes. So men don't reject support, they simply don't register it as actionable. And why this just ask for help, bro, kind of advice fails? From the outside, the solution seems obvious, right? Why doesn't he just ask? But this advice assumes an intact expectancy. It assumes a belief in responsiveness and a prediction of benefit. In learned helplessness, those assumptions are false. Asking for help feels irrational, not scary. The cost-benefit calculation no longer works in this context, in this state. So how anticipatory hope collapses? Hope is often treated as an emotion, right? But in this framework, hope is a prediction. So anticipatory hope means an effort that ignites a response to get a relief. When that chain breaks repeatedly, the system ends up adapting. It removes the prediction. So when there is no prediction, then there is no disappointment, and therefore no movement needed for the system. This is not despair, it's energy conservation for our neurological system. So now let's map this expectancy collapse across the 4C, 4PC macro groups. The same mechanism produces very different identities. In the case of the internal rationals, this collapse shows up as withdrawal into autonomy, into intellectual self-containment, and emotional self-sufficiency, but as a new ideology. Internal rationals are at risk of relational atrophy over time, of rigid independence, and silent loneliness masked as clarity. For them, a possible revealed path would imply restoring expectation through low-stakes reciprocity, to experience some collaboration around ideas, not emotions, and getting some support framed as competence enhancing, not dependency. In the case of the internal emotionals, collapse shows up in the form of quiet resignation, of loss of relational hope, and inward emotional ceiling. Internal emotionals are at risk of an identity built around invisibility, of experiencing chronic self-minimization, or some sort of spiritualized withdrawal. And for them, a possible rebuild path would imply some kind of emotional witnessing without problem solving, to get some slow re-exposure to safe responsiveness, and pursuing some meaning rebuilt through mutual presence and not fixing people or things. For the external rationals, collapse shows up in the form of hyper self-reliance, in this kind of command and control identity, and in the intolerance for vulnerability. They don't allow themselves to fail. So they are at risk of ending up in relational dominance or isolation, burnout at work, and the inability to receive help even when needed. So a possible rebuild path for the external rationals is reframing support as a strategic leverage, and start learning some kind of control delegation, and restoring expectation via competence-based alliances, which is extremely hard to do. And lastly, for the external emotionals, collapse shows up in the form of emotional withdrawal after repeated disappointment, and detachment masked by humor or charm, and a sudden disengagement, which is rare in them, that they are always the soul of the group. So external emotional are at risk of emotional volatility, identity diffusion with the group, and experiencing oscillations between closeness and avoidance. A possible rebuild path for them would be to get predictable, consistent support, to start setting some boundaries that prevent emotional overextension, and restoring trust through reliability and not through intensity. So, in conclusion, many men don't collapse outwardly. They harden. They reduce expectations. They narrow emotional bandwidth. They end up simplifying life. So this looks like strength, but it's often adaptation to uncontrollability, not the choice. The danger is not hardness itself, it's mistaking it for wholeness. So realistically, how anticipatory hope is restored? The paper is clear in this point, that expectancy doesn't return through persuasion. It returns through experience controllability. That means taking small actions that leads to reliable responses. That means putting effort leads to predictable outcomes, and allowing yourself to vulnerability leads to a proportionate care. Hope is rebuilt as a process, as a procedure, not emotionally, which is not easy to get, but this is what it is required. So when a man stops expecting support, he doesn't become weak. He becomes efficient with energy, efficient with energy in their neurological system, efficient with disappointment, efficient with pain. But efficiency is not fulfillment. So understanding this process allows men to drop false shame, to stop forcing vulnerability, and to rebuild expectations slowly and intelligently. Not to become dependent, but to become fully human again. So I hope that this live stream and video has been helpful and has contributed to give you some clarity about this topic. If it was that way, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel to help this content, and as always, much courage, take care, and see you in the next one.